Hi, good evening to all of you. Welcome to the 42nd Leadership Levers lecture on a very interesting topic set to reset the career reboot by Sowjanya Shetty, the founder of Attitude Makeover. And she brings in a very, very diverse background. And like I said, she is the founder of Attitude Makeover. And her incredibly diverse career spans over 25 years, during which she has been a chip designer, an assembly level programmer, worked in interactive television. She had been the chief of staff at General Electric GE, the world famous GE, and she also worked in product management at Hewlett Packard. And she has been a business development sales leader at Microsoft. And she also set up and run two of her own businesses and been a radio jockey. And she also is a very rare patent holder, US patent holder for a very interesting topic called as job processing the notices. And since January 2022, that is from the beginning of this year, she's been the founder of Attitude Makeover, where she conducts very, very thoughtful and very sought after podcasts. And all of that are posted on her LinkedIn page. And I would request when you have little time, just browse through all the topics. I'm sure it's a rich knowledge of very diverse profiles and the diverse thoughts. Most interestingly, some very, very progressive ideas. And we have a presence for today, 42nd lecture. I'm sure with this topic, we will have great insights from her. Over to you, Sowjanya.
Hi, can you hear me fine?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. Good evening, everybody. First of all, Dr. Nagendra, thank you so much for this opportunity. And for those of you who've logged in, I hope you find the next 1 hour worthwhile on a Saturday evening. I think the commitment to just be here speaks a lot about your interest in this topic, and I hope I do justice to this. Can I go ahead and share?
You can. I think let's have the PPT on.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen, Dr. Nagendra?
Yes, yes.
All right. So, hello, everybody. My name is Sowjanya Shetty, and I really believe in the fundamental concept of believe big but start small. And throughout this journey, you'll sort of understand why I'm talking about this and why I'm probably the right person to talk about this. I've tried to, in the last 25 years, understand the process of a reboot because I've gone through several of them in my career. Some of them very consciously, some of them in a very slow way, some of them because of adversities or situations. I've had to reboot at different points, and I sort of try to put together a structure to how you can do a reboot in a very methodical way. And that's what I call it, is deconstructing a career reboot. What are some things you'll take away from this conversation for the next hour? One is hopefully I would sort of be able to build your curiosity to know, first of all, who you are and your personal value proposition. Oftentimes, when we go through the career journey, we sort of forget the uniqueness of who we are. And we also sort of undersell our own abilities and capabilities. So I think by the end of this, if I've triggered that curiosity of really going deeper into understanding who you are and also being able to articulate your personal value proposition, that's one big victory. The second thing is I'd love to see the thought of personal transformation journey. What we go through today, if this sort of sticks in your mind, then I've sort of I've seeded a thought of how to trigger a personal transformation journey. I hope that you would get inspired by your strengths through the conversations that we're having in the next 1 hour. It's very important as you're going through this journey and building your own personal value proposition, discovering who you are, to also own your narrative, because we are very unique and your narrative also will be extremely unique. I hope you don't get the fearful nature of reboot, and instead you understand how the world of Reboot is really magnificent, and you go through a very conscious, well thought of soft reboot. And I'll talk what a soft reboot is in a bit. And I hope in this process, when you're going through a reboot, it's a very lonely journey. And so I hope you would connect with fellow rebooters who've logged in here. The fact that you found this topic interesting, I hope you identify who are your fellow rebooters. Because what I found is when you go through a reboot process, not everybody understands that journey. Only a rebooter understands what a fellow rebooter is going through. So these are some key takeaways I'm hoping we would have by the end of this session. If there's anything else you are looking for, my request is just leave a chat note. So that way, by the end of the conversation, I can answer them as questions and probably run through them as well. With that, let me get started. So I come from the tech world, and I can draw an analogy from a technology point of view, because I think a lot of our tech and our system architecture replicates the human mind and human behavior in practically every stream that you're looking at. Why am I so passionately talking about this? I started as a chipset designer, went on to become a interrupt-level programmer, went on to work in embedded systems, pre-sales and product management in the printing space. So I understand what a reboot from a hardware perspective is. Let me simplify this for you guys. When your application on a device, let's say WhatsApp, crashes or hangs, what is the first thing you would do? You would go and kill that particular app and restart it. It's the standard Microsoft philosophy we've all sort of made a habit out of. Sometimes it's not just one application. Sometimes you probably have to reboot a couple of applications to make your phone work faster or run faster, probably just function right. Sometimes your whole phone completely goes for a toss. You have a blue screen. That's when you pull off hardware, replace hardware. It's a very heavy process. When we talk about a career reboot, whether it is changing your career from, UX designer to product management, or relocating from your hometown to another place, which is multiple application reboots, if I draw an analogy, or just upskilling yourself, which is like one application upgrade, right? Restart. So we normally think, oh my God, that's such a big task. It's such a heavy load. We procrastinate because of certain fears or certain apprehensions of time constraints or whatever is your situation. But hard reboot really happens through adversity. All of us have gone through so many soft reboots, whether it's single application or multiple in our lives, and yet we sort of look at it as, a big thing. So I hope I've, with this conversation, sort of simplified what a reboot is and sort of demystified the complexity involved in a reboot. Now, why am I talking about this? Who am I? I think in the last 25 years, when I worked in the corporate world, one of the things I used to see is when I introduced myself, I used to sort of associate myself with an organization, a job title, or what I'm doing, right? In order to go through a very conscious career journey, and it could be non-linear, it could be going into depth, it could be going into horizontal, it doesn't matter. I think you should be able to step back and sort of strip off all these riffraffs of title and organization to genuinely who you are deep down. Where this leads you to is every person is unique, and you come with your certain characteristics, which are a club of all your journeys and your beliefs and your lived experiences. And so you're very unique that way. And being able to first identify yourself for who you are is the first step of really going through a conscious reboot. And who am I? I felt in the last decade, 2 decades plus, I believe there's a pattern to who am I. I feel I'm a very curious, creative explorer. I feel I'm a solid innovator, a storyteller who thrives in the whole ideation and solution process. I enjoy ambiguity and thereby through that journey, decluttering things for myself and making it simple for myself and for everybody else. I'm a strong believer in Agile and the tools and methodologies that it provides to actually go through not just your career and your job, but also in your life and work life alignment. Why? What else about me? I worked in the last 25 years in 10 plus different industries. By that, I mean, like, right from imaging and printing technology to home and building security to defense company to interactive television to in Microsoft it is almost all industry verticals. I worked in different 9 plus different job profiles. Like I said, I've not had a linear career graph. My North Star has always been to really understand how to run a large company, a boutique, large niche company at scale in a repeatable manner. And so throughout, I've actually taken up job roles that sort of help me understand this. And that's been my North Star. Again, it comes down to who you are, what are you looking for, right? I've been now in the last 1 year, it's been a year now. I started Attitude Makeover, which is into the creative space. Not at all a creator. I'm creative, but not a creator. I think in engineering, where a technical line is a very creative process because you're changing not just one life, but multiple lives. And so, from that perspective, I've always found myself creative, but I've taken a plunge into a creator's journey through Attitude Makeover, whether it's through the podcast or the workshops I conduct on the various aspects of Reboot. I've also been a founder in the past, like I said, I've got this entrepreneurial bug. So I've been a founder of Bubble Wrap as well as Badlo India. How do you go through a reboot? I've sort of brought it down to 5 steps, just going through my journey in the past 25 years of these role shifts and industry shifts. When you start a reboot, sometimes you start clean slate, sometimes you upgrade from where you are. Nonetheless, the first step to any reboot process is to really own your blueprint. What do I mean by that? Again, you'll see a lot of technology terms mapped to an individual, right? How I think the most important thing about a very conscious reboot journey for your career path is to really own your unique you. Oftentimes, what I've seen is, and I've made this mistake very early on, is I sort of look at LinkedIn and I see someone's career journey and I'm like, wow, that guy in 10 years has reached here and I haven't. And, it's sort of the reason behind why you're going through this is very different. And I felt I understood the uniqueness of me only after a couple of years in the industry, because everybody at different points are at different stages in your life. Your relationship with money and time, your relationship with work and life is very unique to you. And so I think first is to internalize the unique you instead of just trying to pressurize yourself in somebody else's journey and sort of then beat yourself for, oh, I'm not there and thereby I need to be doing this. I think getting inspired by your strengths and then going further into defining your unique you is the first step. What I also found is there are patterns to how you restart, whether it is upskilling yourself for another job, completely changing your career, moving hometowns or moving, countries to go and work somewhere. There are different ways you reboot, right? Get married and you rediscover yourself as well as, your work. You sort of situationally led into some of these as well. When you go through that, you start seeing certain patterns on how you've managed change for yourself. Are there coping systems? Are there support systems you've sort of leaned back on? Are there learning patterns, like do you build new networks in the process? I think it's very important to go back to start identifying some of these patterns. And then it's also about changing your narrative. When I look at some of the LinkedIn profiles, it just says like, worked in so and so company, team leader, blah, blah, blah. I think it's important to own your narrative of how not just you've impacted the work, but how you've upgraded yourself as an individual as well. And show gratitude for your journey through your self talks, through the uniqueness of you, appreciate that uniqueness of you. It's also important in this journey to identify some of your blind spots. I'll give you examples. Some of them are how you deal with time and management of your time. If you're constantly, running against time to just keep up with things, then probably look at some of your priorities. Those become your blind spots for or road blockages for change. If you are financially not there, start addressing that first. Start planning around it, addressing it, and probably inculcate a slow motion way of building this as against a hard reset sort of a model. So know what your blind spots are and be kind to yourself in that process for how far you've come. And that sort of then becomes the guiding light for how you go about planning the next steps for the next plunge. That's also what I meant by accept your reality. Sometimes you want to reboot, you want to upgrade, but probably you have bigger hurdles like money, time, other priorities at home. And so it's okay, but then acknowledge that reality and then start planning towards, okay, that reality, how do I change that for myself? How do I unblock myself? And then start working on micro steps to the next future that we're talking about, right? If there's any questions, I'd request whoever is moderating in the back end to sort of pause me and call out. Otherwise, I'll keep
Sure.
continuing.
I think what we'll do, Sowjanya, is I think maybe let your presentation go on, and maybe at the end of it, we will curate all the questions and we'll relay them. Is that okay?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, just to ensure that there's a flow.
Sure. I want to, how do you go about doing this? I think one of the most important things, once you've acknowledged your journey, you've identified what you bring to the table and what you would, what are uniqueness about you and change your narrative for your Blueprint 1.0 for how far you've come. I think the next most important thing is to constantly be in touch with yourself. What do you love doing? What are you really good at? What are, if you're working in an organization, what's the value proposition that you bring to the table? Why are you getting paid what you're getting paid? And how do you upgrade yourself? What would get you paid for things that you are really good at and you love doing in an organization for yourself as an entrepreneur, whatever journey you're in? And also keeping intact your beliefs and your values, because that's the unique you that comes together. I felt in my podcasting, most creators really bring the humanness in the communication and the way they articulate. And I like the way this guest of mine, Philippe Gluckman, who is the creative director of some of the most famous DreamWorks movies like Ants, Shrek, Madagascar, and others, talked about this specific thing of how do you continuously build your Blueprint 2.0. Let me just play that for you. It's a short video from my podcast. What does attitude makeover mean to you?
I'm actually at a stage of my life where I do want to rethink, what are the things that I do, what are the things that I enjoy doing, what are the things I can do or cannot do. I think it can be productive to always have that thought process to think, what is it that I'm doing, and am I into the right thing that is fulfilling for me or not? And I think it's healthy to question yourself and the people around you, as long as it doesn't become a nagging complaint, but that it is a more positive process that happens.
So the reason I put this is I think that we've spoken about how do you look at yourself, how do you analyze some of these, but it's also important to be very aware of, are you donning the hat of the nagger for yourself or the victim mindset, which is what I meant by change your narrative to, internalize to see, are you becoming a roadblock for yourself? What are your blind spots? That's where you observe others to see how are they doing it differently. Have these conversations of, if you observe someone really pulling it together. Hey, can I buy you a coffee? I'd love to understand how did you go about maneuvering through some of these, right? And I think that's a part of building your blueprint 2.0 or your future self. And it's a continuous process of going through these. It's not a one-time thing. It's a continuous process of going through this. So like I said, owning your blueprint, the first step that I think is really important is gratitude, first of all, for how far you've come. How that changes is your self-talk changes. I'd love to understand how many of you have a self-talk of like, I had this for a long time where I'd call myself an idiot or a stupid fool for silly mistakes that I do. If you cannot talk that way to a friend or your child or your parent or your wife, you should not be talking like that to yourself. So it starts first with gratitude for how far you've come, recognizing the transformation that you've gone through so far, and really believing in the change process that you follow, and identifying bloopers or gap holes in that as you mature in this journey is a second thing. Really accepting your reality and not blindly following someone else for their reality and trying to implement that in your story. Identifying your strengths as well as takers. It's very important to look at both. And then owning your new narrative. What's that new narrative going to look like? This is your blueprint journey that I was talking about. The new narrative is, where do I want to go based on what we just talked about, right? The big picture, what do you love doing? What are your strengths? And, what gets paid from these things? And how do you create that value proposition and impact? That's the new narrative. Change that and own that and be responsible and accountable for that. I think that's the foundation for first thing is your blueprint. And it's not written in stone from the hardware or the technology world. If you follow the chip industry, and I think that's a classic space where you look at where technology trends are going and so on and so forth, and what industries are going to adopt what kind of solutions. You start looking at how the blueprints change, your chipset size has changed, what capabilities the chipsets can do has changed, the pace at which it can run has changed. And again, we build chipsets completely mimicking the human world. And so it's just a matter of laterally thinking of, if that is how we built it, why not build our career as well, or our life around things that we really enjoy, and attain that life and work alignment that is really important. Once you've built this blueprint, the next step is to really visualize the future. You can feel sort of stuck when you start looking at the blueprint that I want to go here. This is what I want to head towards. This is what I love doing. Now what? It's important to then step back and look at this big picture of, for this new me and the value proposition I come with. I've been a seller in my last stint at Microsoft, as well as I've done a couple of pre-sales stints, and I ran my own companies, two of them. This is the third. In this process, one of the things I realized is it's important to, once you know your value proposition, to know who are the takers for this value proposition. Not everybody fit into everything. So who are the real people that are really looking for what you bring to the table? Sometimes we get stuck because we probably are real amazing innovators, but we are working in a service company which is not looking for some kind of an innovation. So it's important to understand what's that fitment, what's that customer base, who will really benefit from what you bring to the table. It's important to understand then thereby what kind of skills you need to build in this process, and be balanced and agile and practical when you're planning this. It's also important to understand who you network with as you're going through this journey. When you're upgrading yourself, I'm sorry about my dog, but when you're upgrading yourself, it's important to look at where, what kind of circles are you in? Are you getting influenced the right way in this new blueprint that you're putting for yourself for this journey? If not, should I be looking at a new network? Should I look at mentors? Are there knowledge-based content or learning patterns that I have, which means I should start following new technology trends or people to really see how have they gone through some of these. Those are some things I think I meant by visualize your big picture and be balanced, agile, and practical about it. Limit what you take in this process to not more than 3 work in progresses, like whether it's hard or soft skills. If you want to go deeper into an industry, what's the bigger picture that's happening in that industry? For example, healthcare. What's really happening in that space? Let's say you're pivoting in that space and you want to become a leader or thought leader or a product head or something like that in that space. Understand the big picture of that industry. And third most important thing, I think, is also be always cognizant of your mindset. Where are you not open to change? And what's really pausing you or stopping you from going through that change? Is it some fear? If it is a fear, go deeper to understand what is that fear? What's contributing to that fear? For me, for example, very early on, money was a big thing. Oh, I'm not financially stable. And so I can't take plunges of this kind. And then in that case, I made a life change, which is I decided I'm not going to take loans. I decided not going to have credit cards. And so there are no liabilities first. And that allowed me to then go on a journey. So, which is why I said, know your blind spots, go deeper to understand what are your blind spots. Understand your language to yourself. Are you playing a victim card? If so, again, it's a mindset change. Then you know what to start working on first. Change your self-talk, like I said, and be kind to yourself in this process because you are starting clean slate or probably somewhere mid over there. And don't expect yourself to be the best in class that you're comparing yourself with. It's an important process of going through this step. Step 3 is time becomes a constraint because you don't, like me, I've taken this plunge completely. So currently, all of a sudden, it's everything, right? From setting up a new business in the creator economy to understanding what a creator means in the journey of a creator. Everything, there are multiple things I'm going through as learning. You don't have to go through that if your blind spots or your constraints are much bigger. You need to do micro steps and understand agile and implement agile in this process. One of the most beautiful things about agile is delegation and building trust and empowering your team. And your team doesn't necessarily mean you're a manager, and so I'm talking about a team. Your team could be your support system of home, friends, start looking at where can you delegate things in your home front and partner in this process to optimize your time. So when you're at a peak performance, how do I extend the organization of yourself? Remember, I'm calling it organization of myself, and build your personal network. So it's very important to make time for this change. Oftentimes, I've seen when people come to my mentoring sessions, they say, I have time constraints. I'm working 16 hours a day. Then I said, is there a way you can start looking at where's your time going in that? Are there things I can automate in this process? Or can I start automating to a point where I can then make it so easy that I can delegate it to someone new, a complete junior who's joined into my team, thereby making time for this change that I need to go through. So there are intelligent ways. That's why I said, don't play the victim card. When you're responsible and accountable for your own unique you journey and your new blueprint, you will be responsible and accountable for really optimizing your own time and effort to extend that organization of you for yourself. And I think it's an important part of this. And another important part is be very conscious thereby of the personal network you're building. Networking is not about going to these events and connecting with 100 people and getting the business cards, but it's really about consciously going about who are the right people that can really help me in this transformative journey, whether they're mentors or role models or fellow rebooters or peers who you can learn from on skills that you're trying to build for yourself. The different ways of networking and the purposeful networking. At the core of it, it is how do you build trust and empower yourself, right? The step 4 is, I said you should always, it's called death by planning in the engineering side of design, where you spend too much time planning and designing that you don't take the plunge. Agile, again, really teaches you how to build MVPs. And I'm here talking about weekly MVPs, monthly MVPs. Get your hands dirty. Let's say you're learning JavaScripting. See if you can start freelancing. See if you can start in your own teams, if there's opportunities for you to build JavaScripts or Python scripts to do some data visualization. Start freelancing, start volunteering pro bono. Because you're clean slate and you're starting, you can always mention that I'm clean slate and I'm starting, or I only know so much. No harm in it, because a good manager, team player really values these kind of proactiveness in an individual. If you're starting, start writing about it, vlog your journey, connect with fellow folks who are in that journey, connect with mentors or leaders who are in that journey to hear on their inputs on how to where are you going wrong, and teach, because the best way to learn is to start teaching as you're going through this. Talk about it. And I think that's a very important aspect. And today's world of gig economy, where the multiple platforms which are very informal, extremely forgiving to go through this, is a great way of going and taking this plunge and learning through small and agile MVPs. Some of the soft skills I have learned in this process, and I'm specifically talking about the creator journey, is it really helps when you're talking about every week you're consistently doing something. It builds a lot of confidence in a very agile way. You learn, unlearn, you fail, you make corrections, and failure is not looked at as a big fault of yours, but a learning process. And I think you slowly start seeing, because you're being there, out there in these spaces of the gig economy, blogging, talking about it, or putting yourself out there, your storyline on how you bring things out into conversations when you're in meetings changes from a descriptive to a very prescriptive, with an opinion of your own. Even though you're building an opinion, I don't go with arrogance, but I go with this thing of, pardon my knowledge around this, but I'm just going deeper into this to understand, and then put in your point of view. And I think as you go and put yourself out there with a lot of humility, like I said, you're in the early process. I'm not going with a lot of ego of I know it all kind of thing. You're moving from that descriptive to perspective narrative. And again, that contributes to your value proposition and what you bring to the table. Then you don't have to go and, do your own brand building and things like that. Your brand leads the way into getting a seat for yourself. And be very conscious of your networking, because you learn from the 6 degrees of people that you hang out with. And this journey, especially as a rebooter, you have to have or surround yourself with extremely positive, non-victim mindset, mentors, models, role models, peers who are in the same process of learning, and so on and so forth. Now, as you go through this, I think one of the things I've seen is when you look at a lot of LinkedIn profiles, what's the value proposition? So let's say I'm a hiring manager. What do I get as information about yourself, your perspective of your strategy for how you're looking at your career? What kind of opinions and perspectives you're coming with, or are you just descriptive? I've got to tell you what to do and you'll do what I'm telling you. Are you action oriented? What kind of outcomes have you got? What kind of targets are you setting? How do you communicate? Listen, I showed you those, the agile ways of doing things, right? So it's important to start constantly going back to refine that personal value proposition in all platforms where you showcase your brand for the rest of the world, for your customers. If you look at yourself as a product, and if I come and look at your LinkedIn profile, that's your product description. Is your value proposition coming out there? If you're not looking at LinkedIn, you're looking at a startup, is your value proposition about yourself coming out there? If you're reaching out to a mentor, is your value proposition or what you're striving to build as your value proposition really coming out there? Again, the devil is in the details as you go through this 5-step process. It's always important to take care of some of the roadblocks first. If you have, I play poker, and one of the things you learn in poker is when you're dealt with bad cards, you fold. So you cannot move forward in a journey if you have roadblocks like finance, time, or I have so many responsibilities as a caregiver, etc. You can't punish yourself with multiple things, but you can do something called slow motion multitasking. If you consciously look at these constraints that you're battling with and go to the deeper concept of how do I unblock myself? The questions you ask yourself is not victim-based questions, but it's a more positive, future-looking way of asking. There's a methodology called fishbone analysis that really helps with this, where you go on asking why, and you look at all the factors that are contributing to that why of why you're not able to take the plunge or start, and then look at what has the highest weightage, and then identify how do you unblock yourself, right? So when you own your blueprint, you really go through that model. And it's important to visualize your future, which is why I said defining who am I and defining what is my value proposition today and what it would be a year from now, 6 months from now. I have this habit of going back to my LinkedIn every 6 to 8 months and going back and adding a bullet in the profile and cleaning up the profile. And the bullet always had to be sort of bringing out what I bring to the table every 6 months. If I'm not able to quantifiably put an outcome from what I have taken up as a responsibility for 6 to 8 months, that means either my process of learning is still longer, or that I am sort of, maneuvering in that comfort zone, and I've not stepped out of that comfort zone to the growth zone. So be very intriguingly introspective of how your journey is going. What's that future going to look like? Adapt a lot of lean and agile methodologies to this, whether it's your learning process, whether it's a retrospection, whether it's the weekly consistent repetitive tasks that you get, whether it is automating some of the time-consuming tasks that you have in your day, all of those, right? Adopt lean and agile methodologies. You have a lot of parallels that you learn from the corporate world that you can apply here. If you're not still in the corporate world, there's a beautiful book called The Lean Canvas. I definitely recommend you go through that to understand how to apply this for yourself. Get your hands dirty. Every week, it's okay. First time, probably your sentences, you should see my podcast. If you look at my first podcast today, I completed recording about 56 podcasts. I have evolved as a person in the last 1 year. And you'll see that week on week. You're not seeing it once a month, inconsistent. Okay, this time 1 month later, this next time 6 months later. No, week on week, you're seeing how I'm changing, how my narrative is changing, and you see how my blogs are changing. Put yourself out there. Yeah, you make mistakes. Yeah, you may not like, people may not come and like your stuff. It's okay. Gradually, you'll start seeing your tribe. You'll start recognizing your tribe. You'll start recognizing folks who are in that journey. You'll start learning from each other. and go with that openness to learn. And I think that these 5 things are the most important details of how to really become holistically future ready than just, I'm stuck in my career. I think that guy is doing really well in that role over there. In 5 years, he's got promoted. I should just look for another job. You go to another job. If you're not ready for it, you're just setting yourself up to that negative talk about yourself. It's important to, at your peak, take this set of, carve out time for yourself. So you go through this, creating an upgraded blueprint for yourself. I want to again show you another podcast snippet. This is a guy called DC. He's the Chief Strategy Officer for Tathagat Verma, is what he's called. And he's the Chief Strategy Officer for Walmart. And his perspective on a learner's journey. Let me just play this.
I think that there cannot be any excuse for anyone in today's world not to learn. Gone are the days when we would compartmental our life and say, okay, now that you are 15, 16, 17, you go for 4 years of college. And after that, you are basically just trying to milk that 4 years of education over 40 years of career. That time is gone. There is this whole very interesting concept of half-life of knowledge, which says that like radioactivity, your knowledge also decays into half every 4 or 5 years, let us say. So if I see that my knowledge, what I learned in my master's, it probably reduced to 1% or something, because if I keep doing it. So unless I really learn something, there is no way I can do it. I think that there can.
Sorry. So with that, I hope by this I've actually covered, and I've met these things that I told you I'm going to leave away with this as a conversation. One is, I hope I've built your curiosity to know who you are. I'd love for you to take a moment and, take off. I studied from this college or this IMB or IIT. Just take off all those and see if you can describe who you are without those, just with words like, I'm a very curious person, an innovator of sorts, with just describing yourself. I think that's the first step. If you're able to then go back to look at, what do you bring to the table? What's your value proposition for wherever you are, whichever organization, startup, whatever you're doing currently in your career journey? I hope I've sown the seed of thought of a personal transformation journey, which is more well thought of and structured, and using the right methodologies, being aware of the mental, the physical, and the skills required to go through this. I hope I've given you the inspiration to really build on your strengths and look at your strengths and gratitude for your strengths in your journey so far. And also taking your narrative, my own, I mean, really being responsible and accountable for your narrative, not your manager, not your parents, not anybody else, just you. And I hope this really motivates you to get into the beautiful world of a conscious, soft reboot or personal transformation. Let me pause here to see what are the questions you've got.
Thank you, Sowjanya. I think we have quite a few questions, and let me just relay them to you. And the first one is from Mr. Abhijit Chatterjee. It's quite a philosophical one, by the way. And his question is, as per Advaita Vedanta studies, who am I is more than I. Can you throw some light on this? Thank you, Abhijit.
Abhijit, oh my God, I cannot tell. This is a very deep question. I can speak to you at length about it. So I think for the last, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I don't think I came from a really, highly economical background. My beginnings were really humble. At the age of 13 is when my first entrepreneurial stint started. I used to sell my notes to make pocket money, and made some really good money. Like I said, I'm a very creative person. But as I started growing, I'm a very ambitious person. So as I started growing in my career, I took pride in the companies I've worked in, the roles the job profiles I was taking as always one of the best profiles in the best companies in my class or my batch and things like that. See, I took pride in all those. I think last year, somewhere in the end of last year, when I started thinking of really taking the plunge into this side of the world, which is the creative side, is when I realized, oh my God, there's more to this. Because you're not walking with a title of into any room of, hey, I'm Sowjanya from HP or Microsoft or Honeywell, etc. I'm just Sowjanya, right? It's very humbling and it's required, it's extremely essential then to go deeper into who are you? And your journey is very unique. That's what I meant by it's so unique. You've gone through so many reboots. Apparently, in life we go through 4 reboots. One when we are in our just entering our puberty stage. One when we're exiting the college or a university life and entering the adulting life of career, jobs, and things like that. One is my phase, which is in the 40s, where we call it the midlife crisis. I don't know if I've really gone through midlife crisis or what. And the fourth is when you're in your 60s or a little later in your 60s. So in each of these, you constantly go through this question of who am I? But the definition of it keeps changing because your stage in life is very different. But it's very important to start with that question of who am I? Because it helps you sort of see the uniqueness in you and have the gratitude for that. And oftentimes I think we miss that by miles and we just look at others' journeys and then we sort of, in some ways punish ourselves or set different expectations for ourselves, which is not aligned with the real who you are itself. I hope I answered this. It's a long conversation. I'll have to have a more deeper conversation on that, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah. And this is the question from Mr. Sadashiv. And his question is, ma'am, since you have talked about LinkedIn profile, can you kindly enlighten us a little bit more on this? Thank you, Sadashiv.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question as well, Sudhanshu. It's a very practical question. One of the things I remember this slide where I talked about visualize your future. As a seller and a product manager, one of the things that you have as a default skill is the ability to understand wherever you're building as a product, who is it for? Who's the user? Who's the buyer, right? There are users of this product and there are buyers of this. There are influencers of the product buy process. Similarly, there are partnerships that will really help you make the product successful, deploy the product, enter into a market, a whole bunch of things that come in, right? If I just take that same concept and apply it to the individual you, the unique you, and because you're going to companies, there is someone out there, a team, a company, an organization, or a manager who's looking for a certain specific product capabilities that you're catering to. And you want to venture into the right kind of visualized future. That future could be a new job profile, it could be a new company, it could be a complete upskilling of yourself from engineering to a futuristic manager, a leader, so on and so forth. It's important to sort of fundamentally step back and apply the same philosophies for yourself. And your LinkedIn thereby becomes your landing page for your product. I hope you're with me so far. If that becomes your landing page, how are you using the capabilities of LinkedIn to really bring every bit of your value proposition? Whether it is the personal side of who you are, because I have this concept of always interviewing my team when you're onboarding into my team to ask, what is your weekend like? And it's very important for me, this question, because it sort of brings the other side of you. I don't want someone who's just a workaholic. I need someone who's got the other interests. because a learner, innovator, some of these skills that I am looking for to fit into the culture of my team comes out from this balance of how you constantly learn and grow. And that should come and that should be reflected in your LinkedIn. Another thing is we often say, like, program manager worked in this, HP so and so for 5 years. So what? What did you do? What did you do? And by you being in that team, how did you change the revenue or cost or impact for that particular customer, which is HP in this context? And in over a duration of what time really brings out your responsibility, accountability, value proposition, your ability to upsell yourself and position yourself, all of that. And it's very important to look at your LinkedIn page as your landing page. I'm not talking about go and build your brand, sell yourself and things like that. But these basic things of, LinkedIn is your profile, then it need to have that narrative of who you are. When I go through it, I want to feel like, oh my God, I need to talk to this guy, versus, oh my God, this is another person like the 100 others that I've seen. And what differentiates you from the others is the uniqueness you bring to the table while being aware of the space that you're getting into and being consciously aware of the language and narrative that you're putting there for the space that you're getting into. Like if I have to sell myself to a customer who potentially is a manager in Adobe or Microsoft or any of these companies, what are some of the value propositions he's looking for? What are some salient capabilities he's looking for? Are there ways for me to discover that? Can I start articulating that in a qualitative as well as a quantitative way? These are things that I think is really required for us to watch out for when you look at LinkedIn.
Thank you, Sowjanya. It's a long answer. I think very, very thoughtful, in fact. And this is a question from Mr. Muralidharan Gangadharan. And his question is, how important do you think is a social media makeover to support a transition to a new and different career role? Thank you, Muralidharan.
It's a tough one, Murli. I'll tell you a little bit again about me. I've always been this back-end sort of person. By that, I've been the kind who hates visibility. I've been the kind who likes to do work. I've been the kind who enjoys learning, but I'm not the kind who likes limelight. I hate it. I'm like really, for a long time, the way I used to introduce myself is I'm very shy and introvertish, and I still think I'm a very introvertish person, but the narrative has changed. I think there is a balance between being just bashful about yourself and using social media for that. But at the same time, if your customer is going to find you on social media, the one place that they're going to find you is your story perfect there. There's a difference between the two, and it's important to maintain that balance. It's important to constantly have a hygiene aspect of keeping that landing page clean. But I'm not talking about going there and bragging about yourself every week, but probably writing about your journey. I'll give you an example. When I got into the creator world, I never did this when I was in the corporate world, where I updated my LinkedIn post with posts or thoughts and things like that. But the creator world demanded something like this, not the other side of the world. But this world demanded it. So I started using, like, for example, Instagram. I felt that as a social media platform is a more forgiving and informal platform than LinkedIn, which is more a very formal and not so forgiving one, right? So I started playing around with a few lines as small posts on Instagram. And then I started gradually thereby building my confidence on self. And only when I was thoroughly ready did I go about starting these posts on LinkedIn. And the only reason I do these posts on LinkedIn is because I'm in the creator economy space, and that requires consistency. Now, your space, whatever space you're in, may be that channel of reaching out to that customer that you've identified for your brand is not a social media channel. It's probably somewhere else. It's probably in some meetup group. It's probably in some, Reddit or, some GitHub blog space. You need to know where the channel is for your ideal customer base. There, I think you need to be able to put your brand out. And there needs to be consistency, there needs to be quality, that's where you own your narrative, right? That's where you own your blueprint, and not just like, visualize it and just let it be. So it's very conscious. That's why I said I gave the comparison of the business model put into your own personal self. Because of that, when you're building a product, you think of all this. Sowjanya, is this person who has this kind of car, travels so often here. We know all that when you're doing your product design for e-commerce. We know all that when you were building a phone. And so there are different channels for each one of these, and being there in those channels is really quite. I don't know if social media fits one size fits all, but you need to understand whichever space is industry or visualizing your future you to be, what are the channels where your customers would be, constantly watching for. For me, these have been these very informal GitHub and these kind of channels: Discord, Telegram, Twitter, LinkedIn posts. These are some of the channels where I look at what do they write about. If I'm looking for a database person, I have specific key things I look for. Have they been thought leaders there? What have been writing? What have they been writing about? Have they been commenting on the right blogs out there which are on this space? The different ways, and you need to know the channel that you're going to be present in, and you have to, consciously work on the right channel.
Thank you, Sowjanya. We have two questions from Mr. Nikhil Jain, and excuse me. His question is: good evening, ma'am. Can you please comment on how one should react in workplace when he or she is asked to do something beyond his or her capability? That's first question, Sowjanya. And that's the second question that he has for you is, I'm a military officer and I want to go for a career changeover. But when I hear or see the success or failures of my colleagues who have tried, I get confused whether to go for it or continue with the same. Can you please comment on this? Thank you, Nikhil, for both of your questions.
So if I got the first question right, Nagendra, the question is,
how should one should react in workplace when he or she is asked to do something beyond his or her capability?
Okay, let me take that first, and then I'll ask you for the second question again.
Sure.
This is what I meant by owning your narrative. So the other day I was talking to this, I mentor a bunch of cohorts and individuals. And one of the things he came with is, my boss, I work in the service company and I'm doing this data ETL processing. Basically, job profile is one thing. And he said, I want to grow into visualization of data. So he's in the early stages of data crunch. You're taking garbage out, cleaning the data to be ready for processing. And he wants to move to the next stage, which is, I know this now. I want to be able to start visualizing and generating insights, which is the next growth, logical growth path for someone visualizing that journey, right? Now, his thing was, my boss is not, I don't know, I'm not getting those kind of work itself. So I'm thinking of looking for another job somewhere else. And my answer to him was, dude, you're sitting on so much data. Understand who your customer is. You're giving this data, your customer, your company is giving this data or pulling this data for somebody. How are they using it? Can you go back to analyze what else are you seeing when you go about playing with this? Get your hands dirty, use that data over weekends, start seeing what is happening, understand that industry, and come back to see, are there other things I can actually decipher from this? And then, go back to your boss and say, I've been working on this. I don't know if this makes sense, but I thought I'll just share it with you. You've done two things. Your boss, if he's not a vision sort of person, you understand you're in the wrong cohort itself. Then you probably have to look for another job. If he's a good boss, he feels she's a good boss, recognizes that you're putting in this effort, will take this to go back to see, is that customer finding value in what you've done? It's a win-win. You're making your boss as successful as you can, and that basically means you're upgrading yourself for newer opportunities. If those are not happening, see if you can start playing with this, build this, and then this becomes your narrative in your private blogs that you're building. Like I said, you can go do pro bonos, you can go do freelance writing, you can blog about it, you can, there are platforms for all of this. See if you can start writing about it. There are different ways in which you you know own your narrative, own your visualize and own that blueprint that you put. The idea is not always I'm stuck, and so what do I do? It's when you're there, use the opportunity of that space that you're in, that you're thriving in, to start building the next one instead of really taking the hard route. You still sometimes have to take the hard route, but then, yeah, that's where you take the hard routes, like I talked about. The second question, first of all, have I answered that question?
Must have. And his second question, Sowjanya, is I'm a military officer. I want to go for career changeover, but when I hear or see the success or failures of my colleagues who have tried, I get confused whether to go for it or continue with the same. Can you please comment on this? Thank you, Nikhil, for both the questions.
Nikhil, the second question is what I think Reboot is all about. And if you remember, I started with really go back to look at and understand the unique view. I've made this mistake of, looking at some of my colleagues or peers to say, oh, they're growing, they've tried this, it didn't work for them, or, they're growing, it worked for them, so maybe I should also give it a try. But I think it first starts with really going to understand what is unique about you. And from there stems that whole question of what do you love doing? And, what are some of the things you really do well? And then what are things that you do well and you love doing that gets paid? And then consciously going through the process of, maybe I need to upskill myself in some of these areas, or this particular space that I'm looking at, maybe I have to ground expectations starting from scratch. And I've done that. I've done that because, I was a product manager for a long time. And then I pivoted into sales. And I knew nothing about sales. And in large companies, you don't get like 1 year of honeymoon period to ramp up. So you really need to then identify, okay, sales requires these kind of skills. Do I have them? What do I bring to the table by default from my past? And what are other skills that are missing? Thereby, I can focus my next 1 month on building those. Who should I network with to actually understand what skills are required there? How do I build them? I even went through buying books, following some really good seller profiles in LinkedIn and some of these other platforms. I listen to a whole lot of podcasts. There are different ways that you learn. Understand that and go through that. You cannot replicate what worked for someone else as yours, and you cannot block yourself just because someone else has failed and that is going to apply to you. You have to understand first yourself and the uniqueness of you and what is your value proposition, and then realize, okay, I'm going to experiment with it. Now, I'm talking from a very pedestal of privilege here. That is why I said it's also important in this process to be very cognizant of What are your blind spots? In my mentoring sessions, one of the things I've seen, there are a lot of youngsters, especially in your 30s and also in your late 40s, fall into is the financial pressure or the pressure of time, or I have too many responsibilities, therefore I'm not able to make time. That's where you'll have to first start off with, maybe for some time I'll still have to sustain what I'm doing, but I'm going to make time for myself to upskill myself to make this visual blueprint that I put for myself a reality. But it's not like one blueprint applies for all. You have to create your own blueprint. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, Nikhil, must have. We are 12 past 7 p.m. Sowjanya, will it be okay? Because we still have questions. Can I take one or two more, or maybe 2, 3 more? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. This is a question from Mr. Shamit Garg. And his question is, sometimes careers get stuck due to many variables. Especially last year was the year of great resignation. People change jobs frequently. Is change of jobs the answer? Thank you, Shamit.
Was it Shamit?
Yeah, Shamit Garg.
Okay. Shamit, again, I think this question is coming from experience. It's a great question. There is no right answer for this. First thing, right? There is no right answer, to each their own path. I really believe that's the right way of looking at it. Now, I worked in companies where there are great cultures. When I said I have changed, I've worked in 10 different industries and 9+ job profiles. My longest stint in a company was 15 years. My shortest stint was 6 months. I think the first thing is a culture fitment. You change jobs because either you're culturally not fitting into that organization, or the organization culture might be great, but the team that you're in, it's possible that the subset of those cultures that are being practiced in your team is suffocating enough for you. The people change jobs for various reasons. People change jobs because they're relocating to a new country, whatever, right? So I think the first thing is, if you're in a great culture, like those 15 years, I was not doing the same job. Those 15 years, I've taken up close to 7 job profiles. 7 job profiles cutting across 5 to 6 different customer segments, and the job profiles itself changing from owning product management for a network stack to owning solution product management for printers, like owning a complete printer roadmap, to owning a solution for worldwide deployment, to chief of staff of the R&D hub of India. If you're in a great culture and you've got the blueprint right, and you've got your narrative right, and you've got that the channels as well as your partnerships right, things start falling in place in the right way in the same company. But if you're in the wrong culture, again, the rule of poker applies. When you're dealt with bad cards, fold. Because the impact of that on your own self, your own confidence, a whole bunch of that is really not worth the effort and the struggle. And so there is no right answer, but it is situational. But I've given you 2 extremes of the situations on how it applies. Sometimes you're pursuing growth in the form of financial benefits, and it's rightfully so, and I've done that too. I've worked in a company which was not one of the highest payers, and at that time I was pretty ambitious. I knew I was doing really well in terms of what value I bring to the system, and it probably didn't work. Then you go back, have a serious straight talk. It's not going to happen, not going to happen. So you move on, which is where the clarity of that visual blueprint helps. What it also helps you with is the ability to say no to things. Now, sometimes You might say no to things. I'll give you an example here. Like in Attitude Makeover, I get a lot of requests for, I have a great story. I want to come in your podcast. I'm CEO of so-and-so company. Now, it's very tempting as a creator to say, oh, they're willing to pay now so much, and I'm going to get them into my podcast. But if my value proposition and what I bring to the table is this, and they're only seeing this, I must have the audacity to say, sorry, no. I'm losing that opportunity of, let's say, 5,000, 10,000, but my belief on my value that I bring to the table is here. And I'm not blindly believing that value. I know there are measures for looking at why that value. I have my own validation mechanisms, and that is not the likes and subscribes, but the messages and the impact it's causing on people. There are different metrics that you're looking at. But if you have that clarity, you have the ability to say no to things and walk out of it. And if you have to create a space like that for yourself, it's very important you're aware of your blind spots. When I started my first company, Bubble Wrap, I couldn't take the full plunge into entrepreneurship because I realized I don't have a financial kitty that could support me for like 2 years. And that is when I started deciding I'm going to always save. So when I'm ready, I have a 5-year kitty. Now, again, this is not today. I started this 20 years back. Because when I ran Bubble Wrap, I realized that was my blind spot. I'm not able to take those changes or transitions because that was my blind spot. So know your personal blind spots. And I think that's very important in this process.
Thank you so much. I think we'll have another 2 questions. This is a question from Mr. Sham Babu. And his question is, good evening, ma'am. It's great to hear you. How to deal with a situation where your mentor said you're a great player, great differentiator, but at the end, they don't allow you to move further in your career. What to do then? Thank you, Sham. But if you have gone through it, that painful experience, I think we sincerely regret for that.
So, Sham, again, coming from personal experience, great question. And I love that, right? Like most rebooters, one of the beauty of working with rebooters is it's not riffraff of questions of, what's the industry trend and things like that. It's real practical questions that come. And I love that because it comes from your experience and your journey. I've had those kind of mentors. And I think the idea, it's very, okay, let me talk about mentorship a bit. I believe, and this is over years of, going through ups and downs with mentors, I believe you need to understand the difference between a mentor, a sponsor, and a role model and a coach. You go to a mentor who you see as apt, who's learned certain skills that you want to learn. And it could be short 1-hour conversation. It could be a 3-month engagement. It could be a 6-month engagement, but it's not like a lifelong mentor. You move on because you're always upskilling, you move on. If you're expecting your mentor to become your sponsor, then you've picked the wrong mentor. Because a sponsor is the one where he or she will sort of look at mentoring you. So tomorrow he or she can take you under their wing. You'll also see actions from their end in terms of taking your work, talking about it, positioning you in the right places. Not everybody is your mentor, not everybody is your sponsor. And I think you need to understand the differentiation between these two. Otherwise, you go into these spirals of, I've got this great mentor, a lovely name, he's very famous, and you're just there, right? I think it's important to really differentiate the two. A coach, on the other hand, is someone who's not going to tell you, go do it this way. A coach will only nudge you with the right questions. Like I said in the beginning today, I'm only going to seed thoughts in your brains of how does this apply to you. I'm not going to tell you do it this way because this is how I did it. I'm only going to tell you what applied to me, how did it work for me, so you can draw laterals or parallels to, I can relate to this. No, she's on a different journey, not her, but here's someone else who's talking about their journey that I can relate with. And the idea behind Attitude Makeover and the podcast is exactly that. It's a platform where I'm bringing in people from different journeys to talk about their journey and how they've pivoted on a specific set of things and go deeper into understanding. So you have relativity to the story and the journey. It's important to understand the difference between a mentor, a coach, a sponsor, and what is the fourth? Thought
Role
leader.
models. The role model is there.
Role models. A role model is someone, again, just because Pete Sampras, I love Pete Sampras and how he plays, and tomorrow Pete Sampras gives me an hour. Does that mean I will become as good as Pete Sampras? Does that mean whatever he talks, I understand in that 1 hour? No, he has to come to my level and understand, explain it to me. So I think it's very important to have a role model, but not have a role model as a mentor. It's important to have understanding of what skills you want to build and thereby why this mentor. What specifically is the outcome you're looking for from this mentor or sponsor? And I think that's where the confusion happens and we go into a spiral. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you, Sowjanya. This is a question from Ms. Regin Ravi, and his question is, ma'am, thank you so much for this session. Very much thoughtful. I have started blogging few years back, and I'm unable to continue. Even now, I would like to continue blogging, but could be able to start. How can I start again and stick to it? What mindset shift do I need to change? Thank you, Regin.
So I'm going to reveal a personal front of me. My entire 25 years, I hate sending emails. Nagendra and team are classic cases. They've experienced this with me where they send emails and I hate looking at emails. I hate reading emails. I hate sending emails. But I'm the kind who likes picking up the phone and talking, right? And so when I started Attitude Makeover, one of the things they talked to me about the creator space is that, you need to be consistent in whatever you take up. And so it's true in any line that you take up, right? If you're a coder, it's important that you code every day. So you run the code, you crash, you hit errors, but eventually you'll get better and better and faster. And you'll think differently and you'll start making a better architecture. That's how you grow. Similarly with blogging. But the most important thing is about consistency. So what I started doing, I can only speak for how I went about here. What I started doing is every day, I started first of all carrying a notebook. I want to show you my notebook. This is my notebook. It's blurring off, so I don't know what's happening. Can you see it? This is my
Now
notebook.
we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. And I've got different tabs. So all I do is whenever I've got something coming up, I just write those one lines. And then at some point every day, I had something to put as a thought. Initially, it was a very conscious effort of putting these one lines. Gradually, it became so much of an habit. It's like brushing your teeth. That's the first step. And be forgiving to yourself. Now, when you write, oftentimes we these days are in this internet era of, instant validation. I've written something, how many people like my post, how many people read my post, who viewed my post, blah, 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 blah. I think get out of that. So even if nobody reads my post, it's okay. I'm going to write. I'm going to write every day, right? And I think you don't even have to write 1,000 words, 7,000 words. One line, start with one line, then start explaining it in 2 lines, then gradually build it. It's okay. It's important to just get into that habit. And that's when you'll see, okay, I seem to enjoy these kind of things. I don't know how many of you read, But even in reading, you have this habit, right? There's certain kind of books you like to read, certain kind of books you don't like. Like when I talk about some of the self-help books, people say I don't read self-help books. But I read everything. I read everything from sci-fi to self-help. And so each one has their own style. But identify that. Like, what do you like to talk about? Which would keep you occupied, which keeps you consistently wanting to come back and write about. And if it is not, you've not figured, it's okay. Start writing about everything that comes to your mind. Today I'm writing about this, tomorrow I'm writing about this. But slowly you'll start seeing patterns of what you're liking. It's also about this agile methodology of, getting into that cycle of MVPs, in retrospecting, making immediate course corrections, putting in processes so it's optimized. So I'm not like spending 1 hour every day, oh, I have to write a blog now. Then it becomes work. See how you can make it fun and integrate it into your product, into yourself. And that is when it becomes a little more easier and consistent and repeatable. I mean, for me, otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to. I write every day now. It doesn't mean I've written for that day. I'm able to put a process where I've written 8 weeks before for a podcast that's coming. And I'm actually recording for a podcast that's going to come 8 weeks later. It's over a year of repetitive work. You will figure out your style, your language, your audience, your creativity, what works for you, what does not work, what bores the shit out of you, what is like heavy duty, I don't like doing. You'll figure that out. And that's how you'll go on correcting yourself as well. And so that's what I meant by those, devil is in the details slide. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you so much, Sowjanya. I think maybe with your permission, we have already almost about 30 minutes past 7 o'clock. With your permission, I'll just take one question. Is it okay, Sowjanya?
Sure.
Your last question for today evening is it is from Mr. Samidas. His question is, I'm 34, working since last 12 years and worked in 4 companies in the same post. I did my PhD from NMIMS and now enrolled in IM. Would it help me to get promoted as manager, as I believe I have enough experience to fit in that role? Currently, I'm working in an MNC for last 2 years, and how frequently should I change?
So I I had that laughter not because of the question, but again because I'm able to associate with this. So I think again when I was 7 years into the industry, I decided to do my executive MBA, and one of the things I learned is I got into this executive MBA program at Wharton. And there was a colleague, his father, who was running this wholesale cigarette showroom in the East Coast of the US. And these showrooms are the size of your large metros that you have here, where the wholesale metro. So I remember having dinner with him one day, along with my colleague, who's my friend as well. And he said, "Kitna kharch karoge?" And I said, Uncle, it's about 45 grand per year at that time, the ticket, the annual cost. And he said, why don't you come and work in my store? And you learn everything that you learn over there. And I laughed at him. That's exactly why I laughed at what the question was. But I then decided to still go and work in a store. And I can tell you, each one of us have our own learning style. So it's not like this learning style applies to everybody. But I can tell you the hands-on experience I had looking at his cash flows, looking at inventory management, looking at customer experience, the whole gamut of running that store. Every day in the evening, that was my evening gig. And I did it diligently for 3 months first to see, is this of interest for me or should I apply for the MBA? And I felt I was learning a lot more hands-on than what I would have learned probably in the MBA program. Is this a great decision I've made? Probably I would have picked up more, fruitful job profiles for myself because of the brand. But beyond that, as a learner, I felt I've learned so much hands-on, just being in that store and running those, inventory management. And I learned so much about everything from sales, upselling, cross-selling, because in the counter, when you come to buy a carton of cigarettes, can I sell lottery tickets for you? Right? There are so many things you learn that are normally thought as marketing philosophies, cash flow management, finance and operations, leadership, customer experience. All of these are subjects that you learn, but I learned it hands-on to then decide I'm not going to go ahead with that executive MBA program. But to each their own. And to your question, the answer is, if you're looking for fundamental theoretical knowledge on these aspects, and that's the best thing that you look at as content to provide that, then yeah, surely. But if you're looking for hands-on experience, I think you should start looking at pro bonos. You should start looking at, there are so many freelance roles out there these days in the gig economy to really play around on some of your skills. Study in one of these MBA courses, but also do some of these freelance. My entire Attitude Makeover team is a bunch of freelancers who are studying right now, right? And this is how you gain experience to be able to then build your value proposition. When you build your value proposition, I can assure you, your narrative, the way you speak to your interviewing company, your interview panel, everything, your attitude towards that changes. Then it's not about how long I stick to my company or that job. It's about, am I learning enough? Is that value proposition of myself building? If it's not, then am I the roadblock? Is my mental mindset just stuck? And so am I the roadblock? Or is this culture the right place? Or am I stuck because it is this kind of a job I'm doing? You need to ask these questions. Sometimes we don't ask these difficult questions for ourselves. We're very good at asking this with our children, with our wives or husbands or friends and others. Advice comes dime a dozen, but walk the talk is what I think is important. Ask these difficult questions, because that's when you see the reality of it. I always give long answers because there is a lot of situational thing that happens when you're asking this question. You're probably in a situation today, or probably you've seen someone else in a situation, in this situation. So to each their own journey, but then I would really bring in my perspective of how I dealt with it.
Thank you so much. I think now it's we are 35 minutes past 7 o'clock. Thank you so much for your time, Sowjanya, especially on a Saturday evening. And it's really, really thoughtful, to go through the entire spectrum of career reboot and the kind of emotions and the kind of sentiments that one would have gone and one should go through. I think it's a phenomenal thing. And especially coming from you, because you have gone through yourself, you're very honestly admitted, by the way. In fact, we wanted to ask you one interesting, I don't know whether it's interesting or not, but definitely very curious question that I want to ask you is that I think your surname creates some sort of curiosity in terms of creativity, right? We have seen Rishabh Shetty's, Shilpa Shetty's, Sunil Shetty's, right? And all of them come from the very creative field. All of them, right? I think one part of the, Karnataka, I think people associate with that creativity, or for that matter, reigning in the financial world, because a lot of banks have come from, I think, only one district. That is something that we have seen, but it's a phenomenal thing. I think you have seen it all. I think a whole lot of thing, and coming from you is really, really, I think, well grounded in all the thoughts and all the 5, the steps for rebooting career. Sowjanya, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and sorry, that we have taken more time, but really appreciate your time, and especially on Saturday evening, Sowjanya. And look forward to hosting you once again, maybe in a different avatar for a different topic very soon, maybe in the next year.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to quickly tell you about the surname. I don't think it's a surname, but I'll tell you one unique thing about us. I think, again, it's all upbringing and values and beliefs, right? The growth process. For me, growing up, I think, we were just my mom. I grew up in a single parent household. So it's just my mom, my sister, and me. So when your upbringing gives you a lot of foundations. When you're surrounded with people who are entrepreneurial, like, and even in Kerala, for example, right? And most of India actually are entrepreneurial in nature. It's a small percentage who are like office goers and things like that. But a major part of India is the SME, small businesses, MSME. We're all entrepreneurs. That's why we call Jugaad. We figure out Jugads in India. And I think that Jugaad is what I've seen growing up. But I think what differentiates a Jugaad person from a non-Jugaad person is the keenness to observe and learn from these. And what again differentiates there is not just silently observing, but the art of asking questions with humility. It's a beautiful art if you master this, because when you ask the right questions with humility, first you connect on a personal front, and the person gives a lot more information on the reality of it and the depth of the question. So more open-ended, deep questions than a yes or no question. And I think these are some foundational things that I've seen that differentiates. Like, we don't shy away from asking some of these. And you learn in the process. You make a fool of yourself as well, but that's okay. Sort of thing. Again, to your audience, my handle is Attitude Makeover. I'm on YouTube as well as all the other podcast channels. I'm a new creator, not promoting on any social media by paid promotions. So if you've liked my thoughts and my conversation and you believe in the power of Reboot, I'm building a community of rebooters and content for rebooters. So I request you to subscribe, follow my posts and my blogs.
Thank you so much. Definitely look forward to that, Sowjanya. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.